Hi guys, I am back. We are going to be going over the mid-book review that I posted with the chapter 3 questions last week. Chapter 4 you should have just completed reading this week. I didn't post questions for it, nor did you have to complete Mimbane this week either. I just wanted you to complete this review, so I'm going to go over the answers with you. Okay, so the first thing I put down was I wanted you to know what a character was in a story. And a character in a story is a person, an animal, a figure in a story. Okay, main characters have the most effect on the story, or whatever's happening in the story is happening to them. Okay, the setting is when or where a story takes place. The plot is the sequence of events in a story, in a play, anything that fictional. Okay. Well, it can be nonfiction too, but people don't have a choice in what they would be in a nonfiction story. The conflict, a struggle, or a problem that a character needs to resolve, whatever is happening, that's the problem in this story. Rising action is when the suspense builds and builds and builds. Okay, and then the climax is the most intense part of the story. Okay, whenever it is that you're like, oh my gosh, how is this all going to turn out? The resolution kind of wraps everything up. That's when we find out, what happened to the characters after the main climax of the story. Poetry. Poetry is a work that has lines divided into groups called stanzas. A stanza is just a poetical paragraph. That's how I know what a stanza is. That's how I remember. Just like you write paragraphs in your essays and stuff, a stanza is a paragraph within a poem. Fiction, that's the one that's not true. Okay, nonfiction is true. Fiction is fake. Both starts with F. That's how I remembered. Drama, a work that's divided into acts and scenes with dialogue and stage directions. That was Romeo and Juliet. That was a drama. Okay. Character traits are qualities that define a character, how a character feels on the inside. Okay. When someone asks you to describe yourself using adjectives, and you say things like funny, nice, honest, blunt, all those words where you would use to describe yourself if you wanted to tell someone else about yourself, those are character traits. Okay. Point of view, the standpoint from which a story is told. First person point of view is when you use words like I, we. That's when we're in the main character's head. And third person omniscient, I know that is a fancy word. Omniscient is knowing all. Okay, so if you're writing in third person omniscient, the narrator not only sees everything that's happening, but they also know everything that's happening in the characters' heads. Okay. All right. So I want to keep talking to you about the characters. Okay. There was a list of characters and places in the story that are going to be mentioned on the test. Okay, the first one on the list was Caius Pompeius. He is the oldest ghost in the graveyard. I say that specifically just because he's the oldest ghost that's out and about that Bod knows about and the other characters know about. It doesn't mean he's the oldest thing there. It means that he's the oldest one that people know about. Okay. Then there's fading. Okay. Fading is a way that, or something that Bod is trying to learn how to do that ghosts can do. They can make themselves invisible to the alive human eye. And since Bod has the freedom of the graveyard, which we'll go back to, I'll explain that in a second. Since Bod has the freedom of the graveyard, he can fade too. He's not very good at it, but he can make himself kind of invisible to the alive human eye if he needs to. He doesn't have to, but if he needs to, if he knows how, but he's struggling to learn in chapter 4. Ghouls. Ghouls, I don't know if you guys kind of gathered that ghouls are kind of like the evil side of the ghost world. They want to do bad things to human beings. They go out and they cause mischief and trouble, and they're basically the evil side of the ghost world. And they live in Ghoulheim. Ghoulheim is just this stone city that's kind of the stuff of nightmares. Bod talks about how scary it looks and how no one would ever really want to live there, even though the Bishop of Bath and Wells, the 33rd president, the Duke of Westminster, they're all talking about, those were the ghouls' names. They were all talking about how wonderful Ghoulheim is and how Bod would want to go there, but when he finally sees it, it's not wonderful at all. And then we've got Liza Hemstock, who was buried outside of the graveyard. Bod starts to get curious about the graves that are just beyond where the limits of the graveyard are. And she's one of those people. If you paid attention to what she was in life, she was a witch. All right. And she and Bod get to talking in chapter 4. Mr. Pennyworth is Bod's new instructor, because if you were paying attention in chapter 4, Mrs. Lepescu can't really be his teacher anymore now that he knows who she is. So Mr. Pennyworth is his new instructor, his new teacher, who is also a ghost. Miss Lepescu, she's a hound. She calls herself a hound of God. Okay. She's the equivalent of, I don't know, a werewolf. Except she can turn into a wolf when she needs to. And when Bod gets taken to Ghoulheim, she has to go rescue him. She has also taught him how to make the sounds of the night gaunts, which the night gaunts fly over Ghoulheim, and they're these huge, creepy-looking birds. I imagine like vultures. But bigger, much bigger. We've all seen vultures on the side of the road, but bigger. Like I would think like 2-3 times the size of a vulture is a night gaunt. That's how I pictured in my head anyway. So Miss Lepescu has taught Bod how to communicate with the night gaunts, and he calls to them, and they fly down and help save him with Miss Lepescu from the ghouls that are carrying him in a bag. All right. Nobody Owens was on the list, but hopefully you know who he is. He is the main character. He's the once toddler who has started to grow up in the graveyard, be raised by the ghosts after he escaped the murder of the rest of his family. Scarlet is Bod's friend, who comes to the graveyard for a while anyway. Her parents kind of bring her there, and they sit and they read and they study and stuff while she kind of roams around the graveyard. Remember that this graveyard is old. It's not a graveyard where people are buried currently. I believe it said the most recent ghosts are 300 years old, so no one's been buried there for a long time. So her parents go and read, and she kind of meanders around and entertains herself while her parents are sitting on the chairs in the graveyard. Silas, if you haven't figured out by now, Silas is a vampire. He has freedom of the graveyard because he helps take care of it and keep it safe For instance, on that night where the man Jack, who murdered the rest of Bod's family, comes looking for Bod when he's a toddler, Silas gets him out of there and keeps him from hurting Bod. He gets him out of there and keeps him from doing any destruction in the graveyard. Silas has that gift to kind of make people not remember things or think something else happened. He's a vampire. The freedom of the graveyard we talked about. That means that if someone's granted the freedom of the graveyard, they can do all the things the other ghosts can. That's why Bod can figure out how to fade. He can talk to night gods. He can see ghouls. All those things. The lady in gray. They make an interesting quote about the lady in gray where they say, everyone sees the lady in gray one time in their life. So everybody respects who she is. It's an interesting way to look at who we would, how we would normally picture the lady in gray would be the guy with the black hood, with the scythe, the hooked farming equipment, because that's what that really is. It's a harvesting tool. Death. The lady in gray is death, but we don't picture her as a beautiful woman in a beautiful dress on a big, beautiful horse. We don't picture her like that. So it's an interesting take on it from the author's perspective. The man Jack we talked about, he is the one that murdered Bod's family. And the Sleer, we meet the Sleer, and he is this monstrous snake with a couple heads. He's meant to be super scary, and he protects the treasure of his master who he's waiting for. He's waiting for his master, protecting the treasure. Okay, so like I explained, every class is going to have 10 questions on their mid-book test. Every test is going to be different. So make sure you study, or at least listen to this video with me once or twice to figure out, to know what's what, because you don't know which 10 questions you're going to get. So everybody's going to have something different. It's going to be in Google Forms, so please don't switch tabs a whole lot. If you need to have it reset, you can contact me, but please don't start the quiz unless you know you have a good 15-20 minutes to dedicate to the 10 questions. I will only do one reset for you. So if you need that reset, you can email me and I'll let you know as soon as I get to resetting it. Okay? The quiz will be posted later today, Thursday, and I would like you to have it completed by Monday. Okay? Thanks so much, guys. Good luck on your quiz, and I will see you soon.